Hi, everybody. This is KathyL.Murphy, the Pulpwood Queen, and I'm reporting live on this spring day here in East Texas. I had to get the summer clothes out today. It's nice and warm, and we're here tonight to talk to Sarah Pinner, Sarah is our book of the month for the Lost Apothecary. And now that I know, I just found out in the blog this week that Sarah is from Kansas. And you know what my sister's last name is?
What?
Pinner.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So do you have any family from Southeast Kansas, the Pinners? Reuben and Janine Pinner is his parents.
So Pinner is a married name. It's my husband's name. His family is all in like southwestern Kansas, but from what I understand, there are tons of Pinners in the area.
Well, they're related to pretty much a bunch of people out there, so you never know.
Who knows?
Richard Pinner is my brother-in-law. So
okay.
And there's 3 brothers, and it's just a small world. But of course, with a last name like Murphy, I'm related to everybody.
Right.
So
and it's funny because when I met my husband, I did not know I was going to be a traditionally published author. And now people ask me all the time, is Pinner a pen name or a pseudonym? And I say, no, that's my real last name. So it's kind of funny how it worked out.
Well, my advice to anybody that becomes an author is, in this day and age, just keep your maiden name. Because if anything ever happens, if you've ever had to go to all the places to get your name changed, it's a hassle.
Yeah.
A big hassle. I will always keep my name. So tonight we're going to be talking about your book. But first, because I'm learning all this wonderful things, you're talking about research and everything on your blogs this week on the Pulpwood Queen Presents, I want to know the backstory. I mean, I know a little bit of it, but I want to know, when did you really first think about you might become an author?
Yes. So first of all, thank you, Kathy, for having me on and for choosing The Lost Apothecary as your book of the month. I'm such an honor to be here, and I'm so excited to interact with your fans and your followers. So, and I've got more fun stuff coming this week. So that I'm going to post up on the page. And when it comes to kind of my background as a writer, so as we were talking about before you hit record, before we started the Zoom meeting, I worked in finance for 13 years. I went to the University of Kansas, the team that won the championship last night, and I studied finance and business. And I, straight out of college, went to work for a large private company in Wichita, Kansas called Koch Industries. You've probably heard of it.
Know it. Yeah.
But my whole life, I've always loved writing, and that primarily manifested when I was a child as diaries and journals. And then in high school, I dabbled in some very terrible poetry, and I really didn't write at all in college. I took a couple of English classes that I had to take, but my late 20s, when I was working in the corporate workforce, I decided I wanted to try my hand at a novel length work of fiction. So I enrolled in a couple of online writing classes, and I loved them. I loved the process of writing samples each week and then workshopping them with my teacher and fellow classmates. And so then I wrote a novel length book, and this was not The Lost Apothecary. This was a different book. So I spent about a year on it while working in finance. And then I went out to query literary agents, which is the first step in getting traditionally published. And more than 130 literary agents rejected the manuscript. So I asked them, what is kind of the issue? What are you not liking about this book? And the message that I got was, in that other book, the female characters in particular did not have agency. So things were happening to them and they were reacting, but they were not driving forward their own story and their own destiny and fate. And at the end of that book, a male character essentially resolves all the problems. And these 2 women who are pitted against each other, it's kind of a love triangle, and the man solves all the issues. And the agents did not like that at all, which makes perfect sense to me now. And they said, you can't have that. You can't have your women pitted against each other, and then a man comes along and solves all the problems. So with the Lost Apothecary, which was my second attempt at writing a novel, I decided to go the complete opposite side of the spectrum. And not only were women not being saved by men, but they actually were killing men. And that's what the Lost Apothecary is about an apothecary poisoner who sells poison to women seeking vengeance on the men who wronged them. And I queried only 12 literary agents with this story, The Lost Apothecary, and 5 of them offered representation. So I signed with my agent. This was all still while I was working in finance in 2019. And I signed with my agent. We worked on revisions, and then she sold it overnight to HarperCollins. And it very quickly had international appeal. It's up now, I believe, to 40 translations. So it's available throughout the world, which is really interesting and cool. I guess this idea of a healer and an herbalist is a very universal, it has very universal appeal. So it's been exciting to see the reception across the globe. And so yeah, last March 2021, the book came out, and that same month, my publisher bought my next book off of a 1-page pitch. And then that same week I quit my job, and I now write full time. I haven't been in the, corporate America for more than a year now. So this is my new life is full-time writing. And my second book was just announced last week. So it's all very exciting, because I think this is the first event that I've had where I've actually been able to talk openly about it and say the title out loud. The title is The London Seance Society. And my next book is basically a Victorian ghost story, again, with very, badass women. So I'm so excited, and I just feel really fortunate that my career has kind of, the corporate side is in the rearview mirror, and now this is what I have ahead of me.
That is really exciting. It's funny because you were just talking about Victorian and seance, and they just had somebody just sent me when the last episode of Dark Shadows. You're too young to know this, but I was a big Dark Shadows fan back in the 70s. And I had an author named Karen Essex who wrote Dracula in Love, and it was a Victorian novel. That's a fascinating time period. And of course, anything it's set in London.
Yes.
In London. Fantastic. Well, another sounds like another international type read. This will be exciting. I hope you'll tell HarperCollins that Mandy and I are gonna want to see that book as soon as it comes out. Now,
yes.
Now, are you married?
Yep, I am.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. My next question is, what does your husband think of your book?
Yeah, this question happens all the time. He's in the bedroom folding laundry and keeping my dog quiet. I know, which is just so awesome. Like here I am on this call, and he's folding my laundry for me. My husband and I, we are very happily married. I have no intention of ever harming him in any way, shape, or form. And I also do all of the cooking at this household. And so he loves my cooking. So people will ask him, in jest, are you scared to eat Sarah's cooking? And he just laughs. But it is funny how many men, we have about 50% men on this call, which is a lot higher than most of my events, significantly higher. But it's amazing how many messages I get from men who really loved the book. And it always gives me a little chuckle, because I'm thinking to myself, you do know what the story is about, but I get so many compliments from men. So it's really kind of funny.
I love that. Well, it's a fascinating story, and I don't want to give away anything, but everybody that's going to be listening to this, because we're recording it to go up on YouTube, you've got to read this book. Of course, I've always been a big fan of Alice Hoffman, and Alice Hoffman writes wonderful, practical magic, and all the prequels and everything that she writes. Those are and I'm a big Southern Gothic fan, so this was right up my alley. And it's so funny. I have two daughters, much like Impractical Magic, and we had a tree trunk that was cut down and was hollow. And my kids were always dumping stuff in it and stirring it. And I know when people drove by, they thought, oh goodness, what's going on over there at their house. But they're the same way. They love these type of books. And I think it says more not about the men reading your book, but when they told you that you had no problem getting an agent when you started, concocting these concoctions for that they jump right on that. Says a little bit about publishing today too. Maybe there's some harboring some.
It really does say a lot about publishing, actually. And I think especially in the historical fiction space, so many stories now are showing this side of women in history, whether they're based on real life characters, World War II female fighter pilots, or like Kate Quinn, her book that just came out a couple weeks ago is about the most well-known female sniper that no one has ever heard of. I had not heard of her, but apparently she was really good friends with Eleanor Roosevelt. So we're seeing a lot of attention and focus on these stories where women are sort of getting their airtime finally. And I would be lying if I said that didn't reflect in the types of stories that I'm now trying to sell. Part of it is that I like writing stories about strong, sassy women, but I also have a very business oriented mindset, and they're selling. The books like that are selling. So I'm keeping that in mind as I kind of think about future projects.
That's great. Well, how did you come up with the idea for the second book?
Yes.
Have you gone to London or what?
So I've been to London many times. It's my favorite city in the world. The city of London provided more inspiration for the Lost Apothecary because so much of the Lost Apothecary takes place in these back alleyways and this little hidden shop. And then we see a lot of street scenes as well, as the characters move about. But the London Seance Society, my second book, that was actually inspired by a brief conversation I had with my mom. She loves ghosts. She's a very avid believer in the spirit world. And she wanted, a couple of years ago, she said, let's go to a seance. But she made it very clear she didn't want to go to a seance that was a joke or an act. Like, she wanted to go to a real seance. And I personally don't believe in ghosts, but I wish I did. I love the idea of ghosts. And that's actually something that's really explored in my story, is truth versus illusion as it relates to the spirit world. So as it turns out, there are two main spiritualist village or societies in the United States. One is up in New York, and then the other one is here in Florida, about 2 hours from where I live. So my mom and I booked an Airbnb, we got in the car, and we drove out to this little village in Florida, and we went to a seance. And it was very interesting, but that was part of my research for the second book. And it's funny, we went to one seance, and it affirmed my mom's belief in ghosts, and it affirmed my disbelief in ghosts. So it's really amazing how two people can attend the same event and walk away with both of their points of view confirmed. It's kind of like how two people can read one book and they both walk away with vastly different impressions of it. So I think that's something that's going to make for some very interesting book club discussions after this next book is out, because the book does not set out to, I don't have a hidden agenda. I don't set out to say ghosts are real or are not real, but it's something that my characters grapple with.
That's going to be so good. I can't wait to see the cover. Have they started working on that yet?
They have, yes. I've seen a couple of about a dozen cover concepts actually. A challenge that we have is you all have seen the cover for the Lost Apothecary, which is obviously I'm biased, but I think one of the most striking book covers I've ever seen. And so we have set the bar very high. There have been so many countless readers who've told me that they bought the book because the cover jumped out at them and they want it as their wallpaper or what have you. So we are in this very challenging position now of finding a cover that kind of lives up to the first one. And I think it's going to take some time and a lot of careful consideration.
Well, I'm sure HarperCollins always does a great job. So they'll come up with something just fantastic. And, you know, I just put my daughter's Ouija board in my booth to sell. I think I'll pull it back out and save it for our next year's book club meeting. I have a feeling we might be, and I can wear the turban, y'all. I can wear the
Yes. You might want to find a turban that's black. So, you know, in my book, a lot of the characters are the scenes when they take place, the characters are wearing their traditional Victorian mourning attires. So their veils or their very dark brooches, you know, gemstones around their necks, what have you. So I think there will be a lot of fun things to incorporate when the book comes out.
That'll be exciting. And I'm just, you know, it's so thrilling to hear you talk about the success of this book, because right now this has been the horrible 2 years for most people. And I have people, you know, calling me literally every day. What am I going to do? You know, I got my book back from my publisher, you know, it wasn't selling, so they let me have it back. I just hear so many things about what's the best experience that has happened since your book came out that you would say?
Gosh, well, you know, I will never forget you know, the book was an instant New York Times bestseller, and I'll never forget that phone call, which was so the books come out, new books are released on Tuesdays, and then the following Wednesday is when the New York Times list comes out. And I was in the car with my husband on the way to a wine event, and I just will never forget, you know, my editor saying, you've debuted at number 7 on the list. And the reason why that was such an impactful moment is because I could never write another book in my life and still that achievement would be mine. It's kind of like having a college degree. Once you've got it, it doesn't matter what you go and do in your life, you always have that college degree. And
boy, that's
so
right.
Yeah. So that's very much how I felt. You know, I just like I had earned something that no one could ever take away from me. But then, you know, as the months went by, what really stuck out to me that was meaningful was some of the messages that I get from people who have told me that the book changed certain aspects of their life. So I had women say, I've suspected that my husband is cheating on me, and this book has given me the courage to dig in and, you know, kind of figure out what's going on. I had a woman who suffered a miscarriage while she was reading the book and said that it gave her a great sense of peace and kind of was making her think about some of her life choices. I had a young girl from France. I want to say she was maybe 14 or 15, say just this book, how much she loved it because it has been translated into French. And so she read it, just saying how much it meant to her. I've had so many young writers say that this book has made them want to try and write their first book. And then, of course, so many people who work a day job like I did, who have said they've been very inspired. And the reality is I don't have any formal writing education. I don't have an MFA. I took all of 2 college classes that were required. The only thing I did was take a few of those online writing classes when I first got started, which anybody can do. And then I just, I started, you know, sitting down and putting pen to paper and seeing what happened. And so I hope that that message is inspiring to people who feel like they want to write as well, but maybe they feel like, you know, they have imposter syndrome or they don't have the right background or education to do so. I'm out to say that you don't need any background or education. You just have to have discipline and a love of writing, and that's enough.
I agree with you. In fact, some of the best storytellers I've known, and some of the best artists, because I'm an artist, have had no formal training. They just are born storytellers or grew up in a family of storytellers. And it's an art. It's just like anything. You kind of, whatever your experiences are, you bring into the picture. But your education certainly probably was good for you, because you were able probably to figure out how to negotiate things once you figured out how things work. So you have that advantage, but congratulations. I mean, that is amazing. I want to open it up for all the people here, because, we have a lot of authors here, and we all love to ask, what'd you do? What'd you think about, whatever. So let's open the gallery up. And if you go to reactions and hit the little raise your hand, and I'll let people go by seeing that little hand raise. See reactions at the bottom of the page. It has a little thing that says raise your hand. And then that alerts me if you have a comment or a question. Yeah. Okay. Anybody going to punch that button? Oh, well, Jacob.
Showing.
Jacob
Yes,
got up.
I did. Okay, I have two questions for you, Sarah. Do you think this is Jacob from Reading Corner, by the way? Do you think your background in finance and stuff helped you as far as to like promote the book, like when it came to like talking about the book? Because I know when you're writing it, it's a very like you're alone and you're writing it, and then having to promote it, it's a whole other beast. And my other question is, what do you hope your legacy as a writer will be? And do you see yourself writing different types of books, or are you going to stay in the same genre?
Yeah, thanks, Jacob. Those are great questions. So I will start with the first one. Absolutely, my my 13 years in corporate America have, I think, provided a benefit with some of the soft skills that are involved in the world of publication and marketing and promotion. So everything from just the ability to hold a conversation that can be, I mean, the reality is when I first started talking to these editors and agents, they're very intimidating conversations. And these are important people in New York City. And that's very scary. But when I used to work in finance, I had a lot of scary conversations with CEOs and CFOs and high net worth people. And so I was very comfortable with speaking up in meetings, with presenting in front of large groups of people, which of course I do all the time now. And then also things just like composing a thoughtful professional email, that has proved to be an advantage. And then absolutely some technical skills as well. So I've, I'm very comfortable with kind of all sorts of computer tech skills because of my time in the corporate world. And so that has helped. For example, a lot of my my imagery and promotional stuff I do on Canva, and that's been a really good tool. A lot of authors use that for their social media and promotional stuff. So it's funny because it's easy to look back at the time that I worked in finance, and it's easy to feel resentful and think, gosh, all of those years I could have been writing or what have you. But I don't feel that way. I feel instead like that was exactly what I needed to be doing for those years. I think that's where I was meant to be. My first trip to London was the result of a work trip. So for one of my former companies. So if I hadn't taken that trip to London, I don't even know if the Lost Apothecary would exist today. So I'm very much the type of person who believes that every stepping stone makes sense at some point. And I can look back now and say, hands down, I'm glad for that experience. And then your second question about possibly switching genres and what kind of legacy I would like to leave as an author, that's such a great question. And the word legacy is such a big word, particularly because my husband and we don't want children. We're child-free by choice. And in some ways, I think to myself, my books are all I really am going to leave behind because we aren't having kids. So there's even more like responsibility, I think, in that way, on me to think about my legacy. But I love the escapism that you can find in fiction. And that does not matter what genre you're writing in. And it doesn't even have to be fiction. It can be nonfiction as well. And one of my favorite authors is Eric Larson, and I have no problem escaping into his stories. So I think I would like to maintain a clean PR presence. I hope that I don't have any PR mishaps that would put a stain on my legacy, so to speak. So I think as long as I remain professional, kind, supportive of other authors, and then I write books that most people can escape into, not every reader is going to like every book I write, but I think if I can do a decent job with most of them, then I'm in a good place. Related to genre, I've always thought that I want to try my hand at a contemporary thriller. But I would want to keep it in a really rich setting because I like historical settings, which is why I have been writing historical fiction. But I think I could get away with a contemporary thriller or mystery if it's in, maybe like a beautiful chateau in France or some other really compelling setting. But that would probably be my next attempt. If I do switch genres, that would probably be where I would go, would be a contemporary thriller.
Oh, that's great. Let's see, Sarah, you had your hand up.
Oh yeah, I think my hand disappeared, so I had to switch my background.
Well, it's kind of the color of the tapestry behind
it just
so I didn't see it at first. Okay.
But I just have to say the mudlarking was so fun because here's a couple of pieces I got. I didn't even know what mudlarking was until I read your novel, but my husband and I did this at Lyme Regis some years ago, and I actually found this beautiful little blue bottle, which is packed up because we're getting ready to move. So anyway, I really enjoyed that aspect, and all of the details of the little alleyways and the shops, like you said, the implements that Nella uses in her apothecary shop, all of those little details of the history I really loved. Now I have to ask you the question. When I read that first chapter, I went, there is no way I'm going to sympathize with this woman who's a poisoner and a murderer. And yet I got drawn in. So was that off-putting to your agents or, when you were making the queries? It seems like it wasn't. I'm a little surprised. So
yeah. No, it wasn't off-putting. Thank you, Sarah, by the way. Thank you for showing those little pottery pieces. I have a few of them myself that I found while mudlarking in London, and I can talk about that in a few minutes if you'd like. But as it relates to Nella, she is a morally gray character. We learn on the very first page that she's a poisoner, and we learn on the back of the book that she's a poisoner. And my goal in telling her story was to show the reader what emotional and internal scars she had that led her to seek vengeance in the way that she is. And I hope that at the end of the book, I don't think people close the book and say, I now would defend or agree with what Nella is doing. But I think that they say, I can understand why she's doing what she's doing. And that's exactly where I want readers to be. They don't need to agree with any character's actions, but hopefully the author has done a decent job of explaining enough backstory and motivation and internal thought to help the reader understand why they're taking actions they are. The pains and situations that Nella suffered earlier in her life were horrific and lasted her entire life. And I think that's probably about as powerful of a story as I could have given her. I don't know what else I could have made happen to Nella to fully exempt her from any blame at all. One of the things that I think is interesting about a dual timeline novel where you're telling the historical next to the narrative or next to the present day narrative is to show readers how these two women, Caroline and Nella, each handled their own betrayals in different ways. So 200 years ago, women simply did not have the options available to them that women have today. They could not leave a marriage. They could not make childbearing decisions for themselves or have any access to birth control. They could not enter into their own contracts. They could not own their own assets. They could not pursue their own education. Everything was really dependent on finding a husband. And so Nella and the clients that she serves, when they fell on hard times, they had very limited options, and those options were extreme. But when we see Caroline's story, she has so many choices available to her. She can go back to school. She can start or stop her birth control. She can divorce her husband. She can sell something, buy something. All of these decisions are available to her now. And so we see her handling her betrayal in a honestly more healthy way because of these options that she does have. So that's one of the things that has made for some very interesting book club discussions, is the difference between these two women and what is right, what is wrong. I think it's mostly gray areas for the women in the story.
I think the best books are when you've got somebody who's bad to the bone, because there's something to discuss. If you read a book that's wonderful and everything is just, you say the book was good. What was good about it? Everything. But if you don't like a character, everybody will talk about it for hours. So when people say, I hated the book, I go, great, we're going to have a good book club discussion, because I love it when we all come from such different experiences. We're going to experience things different. But I think you hit a great point, Sarah, when you said we get to see why they are the way they are. And that's the question I always ask when I see these school shootings. I always want to know the story behind the story, because I think, what would make a child, a woman, a man, do something as horrific as that? And you never hear, unless they later on make it into a movie or something,
Right.
But I really wish people would focus on that and more, so we can understand, hopefully solve those dilemmas. But so where did you pull your villainous from? I mean, what were you like as a kid?
Yeah, no, that's so funny, because I always tell people that Nella was the hardest character for me to write, because she's so aggrieved and vengeful, and I am none of those things. I am a very happy person. I'm very positive. I love my life. It's not perfect, but it's certainly not my problems would not lead me down the path that they led her. So that was a great effort in imagination, and it has given me a new respect for actors and actresses in Hollywood who don't have the luxury of sitting in the privacy of their office and writing a story. They have to actually get up in front of a camera and a production crew and exude that character's feelings, whether it's through tears or screaming or what have you. It's hard enough to write, much less act. I don't know how they do it, but that was definitely, that was an exercise in imagination, and, just trying to ask myself, how would I feel if these situations happened to me? So writing Nella was challenging and often kind of a heavy thing to do.
Yeah. And that's a good point too, because on actors, a lot of actors, if they play a really bad role, then they're kind of stereotyped. And people think that's real. I mean, I've had people that, have played bad, I've heard them on the air say, somebody spit at me on the street. I'm not that person. I was just portraying it. But people get mad at the characters. And So you're right. You're a little safer, Sarah, from writing
Yeah.
it down and everything. But have you ever thought about this being a movie?
So Fox Entertainment did option the Lost Apothecary for a drama series last spring. And from what I have heard, they are drafting up the pilot episode. There are so many hoops that have to be jumped through for a book to actually hit the screen. And the reality is that many, many, many of the books we all have read and loved have been optioned for TV. So it sounds really exciting and it is really exciting, but there are still so many steps that need to happen for us to actually see it hit the television.
And during the time of COVID, pretty much Hollywood was shut down,
Right.
It's just now starting to open back up. So congratulations on that, because that's a thrill in itself too.
Yes,
I've
absolutely.
had that experience. It hasn't been made to film yet, but I've had the experience of being optioned, and it kind of buckled me to my knees. Were you just shocked when you found out the news?
Yeah, absolutely. There were, so from what I understand, dual timeline stories are very difficult and expensive from a production standpoint. Outlander is really the best and most well-known example, but most of Outlander is set in the historical era. And also it's Outlander, like it's, international sensation for years and years. So what I had learned from my agent was that all of these studios were just passing on it. And they had good things to say, but it was just rejection after rejection. And many of them were saying it's because of the dual timeline. But then Fox just randomly kind of came out of left field and said they wanted to buy the option. So I was absolutely floored because I thought for sure, this won't come to fruition.
It's really great. I'm going to keep my fingers crossed and pray that happens, because I'd sure like to see it. I would be very interested to see who they would cast has any of you guys thought about who might be any of the characters? I always kind of play out people in my mind when I read.
Mm-hmm.
Do you do that, Sarah?
Sometimes. I don't watch a whole lot of TV. I'm terrible with pop culture. I kind of like the idea of like a Kathy Bates type character for Nella, but I'm drawing kind of on the movie Misery when I say that. And I know Kathy Bates, she also plays a very happy, wonderful character in a lot of movies. So if I had a greater breadth of knowledge about different TV shows, I would probably add more value to this discussion. But every time people ask me about casting, I just kind of come up short.
Yeah, you got to be a big movie buff like I am. I love to watch movies, but at the same time, I think some of the, like Outlander, for example, I didn't know either one of those actors that play the characters. So that when you don't know who they are, I don't know if it's just me, but does it seem more real when you don't know who they are? I mean, when Meryl Streep comes on, you go,
yeah,
Meryl Streep is doing a wonderful Julia Child, and you'll forget it after you start watching it for a while, but you never, in the back of your mind, you always know, that's Meryl Streep, but if you get like the Queen's Gambit, I'd only seen that girl in one other film, and she was so mesmerizing, I just could not stop watching that. I'm a Netflix binge watcher and movie watcher, but I don't watch television either. In fact, I didn't even know about this game you were talking about, Betty, until somebody said, I bet you're really rooting for Kansas. And I go, what are you talking about? And I'm not really a big sports buff. So it was like, yay. Is it the Wildcats or the Jayhawks I'm supposed to be cheering for? I had no idea. My dad would get so mad at me because he was a big football fan. So back to your story. So you spend how many hours a day working on writing? Is it mostly mornings?
So when I was working a day job, the only time I had to write was in the morning before work. So I would wake up about 5 and start working. Now that I don't have to worry about that day job, I so I'm most creative and most mentally sharp between the hours of like 7 and noon. So I will do my writing or revision then, and then in the afternoon. So over lunch, I'll try and exercise, eat something. And then in the afternoon, I will do more admin, like low mental energy tasks, whether it's email or promotional stuff, social media. Then I'll often read and maybe catch a little nap if I can. And then I start dinner and welcome my husband home and do whatever we're going to do that evening. And that's kind of my routine, but most of my work is done in the morning.
That sounds like a wonderful life, doesn't it? It really does. And it took you how long to write the first book? Did you say?
The Lost Apothecary took about 12 or 14 months on my own drafting, and then a few months of revision work with my agent, and then a few more months with my editor.
That's really fast too, because
yeah,
I had 2 small children and running a full-time business and in everything. It took me 6 years from start to finish.
Mm-hmm.
And you graduated from KU in 2008?
Yep.
That's when my book came out. And I did a book signing in Kansas City. So I was
wow.
Yes,
That's
I
awesome.
did. And it was really fun because my next door neighbor girls that I grew up with, the Mary Annies, all live up in Kansas City and Topeka, and they're judges and professionals, and they all came. So
wow.
it was really fun to see the hometown girls in Kansas City. And it was freezing because it was January. I remember that. And you got a lot of snow this year, didn't you? Oh, you're in Florida now.
Yeah, not in Florida, not a single snowflake, which is exactly how I like it.
My aunt just moved back to Kansas, and she's up in Kansas City, and she said they got 4 snows this year.
Wow.
She moved there from Palm Springs. She goes, I think I made a mistake. I like to play tennis. It's not going to happen. I said, well, they were having 115 and up temperatures. So she said, it's get too hot here.
Yeah.
It's time to move back home. And then she got Kansas winter. And Lawrence is brutal, man.
Yeah,
all the hills. People think Kansas is flat. It is not.
It's not in Lawrence.
If you walk on that KU campus, you're going to get thin.
I do see, Kathy, that we have 3 people with their hands up. Should we take some of their questions?
Where are they? Oh, Betty. Go ahead, Betty.
Well, my one question you kind of answered, which was easier to write, the villain or the people that you're more like. But do you find that you get lost in your imagination when you're writing that villain as someone that is totally different than your character?
Yes, absolutely. The easiest character to write was Caroline, because she's present day and she's seen London for the very first time. And it was so easy for me to draw on my own experience, going to London my first time and kind of all of the things that I love about it and recounting some of that through her eyes. And then Eliza was the most fun character to write because she's so playful and inquisitive, and she tends to insert herself into conversations where she's not welcome. She was just a real breath of fresh air to write, and I think for readers as well. But yes, to answer your question, the fact that I can't relate to Nella and it was all pulled from my imagination is very freeing in a way, because I'm not held to the boundaries of what I know and experience. It's almost like a fantasy world. And I think about these fantasy writers and how they create these worlds and these characters or these beasts or whatever it might be. And these rules of the universe, whether it's magic or what have you. And I think, gosh, that is so freeing, because you can kind of just do whatever you want. Like if you want to name a character this, or you want to make them half lion, half horse, like whatever you want, you just do. Mm-hmm. And it's funny, I didn't really mention this earlier, but I did consider writing narrative nonfiction years ago because I love Eric Larson so much, and I aspire to write anything like him. I had thought to myself, well, maybe I can find a really compelling untold story and write something nonfiction. And I quickly realized the truth is way too restrictive. And that's why I went the fiction route, because you get to lie and you get to write whatever you want to write. And that's another reason I kind of like magical realism or speculative fiction. So, my second book is about ghosts and the occult and spiritualism. And because none of that can be proven or disproven, I had a lot of free reign with how I wanted the seance sequence to work in my book and how I wanted ghosts to present themselves or not present themselves. And I really like this. The same concept applies with magic in the Lost Apothecary. I just felt like it's very freeing to write things that you don't know and can't prove, or characters you can't imagine. So that's a great question, Buddy.
Well, considering the two different books, did you have a lot of fun in researching both of them?
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. I loved researching poisons for the Lost Apothecary. When I first started at the University of Kansas, I was pre-med, and then I was pharmacology, and I did terrible in my chemistry classes. So that was never going to pan out. But point being, I've always had an interest in medicinal type things and herbal remedies. So I loved the research for that. And then, of course, the research for the second book. I mean, who doesn't love reading ghost stories, and who doesn't love reading firsthand accounts of people who claim that they have conjured ghosts? It was spooky and mesmerizing and just made for some really fun research. And I'm determined to keep writing books where the research is fun for me, because otherwise, why am I doing that? Why am I writing a book about a topic that doesn't interest me? So the research is a lot of fun.
I don't know who was next, but Eileen will go ladies first. Where'd she go?
I put my hand down instead of taking the mute off. Hi, Sarah. Well, I'm so impressed with your success and congratulations. So my question is about what kind of publicity and marketing went into a book that gets released on a Tuesday and winds up number 7 the following Wednesday on the New York Times list. Were you involved in that? Did you have, what happened? How did that?
Thank you for the question, Eileen. So the Lost Apothecary, when my agent sold it to HarperCollins, it was, they stated verbally over the phone when they made the offer for the book deal that it would be their lead title for spring of 2021. And a lead title, when a publisher uses that phrase, they mean that they're going to be putting a lot of resources toward it, both people and money. And my agent said that was a very good sign that they intended to kind of go all out with their publicity and marketing efforts. And that was very clear to me as they got rolling on some of those things. So for instance, Book of the Month, which is of course has a huge subscriber base. My publisher sent my book to Book of the Month to see if they could get it kind of on the list for consideration. And I don't know the full process, but I know there were multiple selection steps. And eventually I was so excited to learn that Book of the Month had selected it as one of their 5 titles last March. And that was a huge publicity boost. Of all of the things that happened to the Lost Apothecary, that was hands down the number 1 boost from a visibility perspective. But that would have not happened if my publisher hadn't felt that the book would appeal to their demographic and taken the initiative to send it on to them. My publisher also, I know, took out some pretty significant ads, on Goodreads. There was the website, there was ads running for the Lost Apothecary for weeks. There was a couple in the print New York Times. So all of these things I know contribute to the visibility, which ultimately contribute to sales, which is what drives things like hitting the bestseller list. So It's interesting because I know that there are so many good books, whether self-published or through independent publishers, or even big 5 or big 4 publishers now, that just don't have that same marketing support, that are just as worthy, if not more worthy, than my book to hit the bestseller list. And it's one of those things that it's kind of the way the business works. I think it's very much luck of the draw. It's what the industry thinks is trendy at that exact moment. And I'm not naive enough to think that I will have that sort of luck with all of my future projects. So I'm thankful it was my debut. I think I'm thrilled that I got a lot of visibility through my publisher with that first book, and we'll kind of see what happens with future titles. I hope that there's similar efforts, but I also am not I'm not confident that will be the case. So I guess we'll just kind of see.
So are you now also, you said that you're doing you use Canva for some of your marketing or publicity, you do it yourself. So you're doing some things yourself as well.
So since the Lost Apothecary has been out for more than a year now, my publisher is not running ads anymore. If you go to the Goodreads website, you're not going to find an ad for the Lost Apothecary. This is very much even the book it came out in paperback 2 months ago, or about 6 weeks ago. And there was a little bit of advertising related to that, but for all intents and purposes, I think my publisher is pretty much done with pushing the Lost Apothecary. So when there are, for example, events coming up like this week and next week, I have some events. I will go put together a pretty little visual in Canva and promote it that way. If Amazon drops the Kindle price to $1.99, which I'm sure will happen this year, I will go promote that, shout that from the rooftops. So it's things like that. And my publisher will still retweet or repost some of the stuff that I put up, but they're kind of letting it just do its thing now, and will start to turn their attention this fall to my book 2 and devoting their efforts on that.
So when is it coming out, the second book?
Yeah, it's slated for April of next year. So about 1 year. Which I know feels like a long time, but I'm still finishing up edits on the book. And then of course there are so many, it has to go into production and copy edits and a sensitivity reader and design teams and all of that. So there's so much that happens.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody else have their hand up? James?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. Okay, I'm wondering if the new one is also a time slip.
So that's a great question, James. Thanks for asking. The next book is not dual timeline. The entire book is set in 1872, high Victorian era, and it's a much more linear plot as well.
That would be my preference. So, have you gotten feedback that the time slip is still a big thing among editors and agents?
So the feedback has been less about time slip and dual timeline, and more so the feedback that I got was that readers did not love my present day timeline. I think that Caroline, her voice, and kind of her experiences, people preferred Nella and Eliza's narratives. As for writing dual timeline, I mean, a perfect example is Fiona Davis. Every book that she writes is dual timeline, and her books continue to sell like hotcakes every year they come out. And Kate Quinn does quite a bit of dual timeline as well. So I don't think that dual timeline is going anywhere. I think we'll continue to see that story structure for a very long time. But for me personally, on the heels of some of the feedback I got related to The Lost Apothecary, I knew that I wanted an all historical narrative.
Yeah, I read Fiona's The Address about the Dakota building, because I love the Dakota building. And yeah, the modern modern take on it. It just took me out of the story every time.
Yeah.
So it's kind of hit and miss with that. So I'm looking forward to the Apothecary. I haven't gotten it yet.
Thank you.
I'm interested to know if with the new book, if they've done 8, 9 covers, what your final opinion, how your final opinion will matter, because with St. Martin's Press and Pushing Out the River, we did like 13, and they came up with, well, this is the final one, and it looked like a romance novel, and I wasn't writing a romance novel. And I said, no, absolutely not. And they said, well, too bad. It's what it's going to be. But then it got to a higher up. Maybe it was Sally Richardson, but it got to a higher up, and they said, and they came up with a cover that we all liked.
Yeah.
Wow, that's interesting. Yeah, my agent in the contract, she wrote in that I have cover approval. So they will have to get me something that I like. The covers that they've sent over so far are okay. They're not bad. But we want something more sinister and ghostly. And the team is trying to strike a more like upmarket commercial look, which I get. I think there's a purpose for that. But I want to strike a balance. I want like kind of a sinister upmarket look, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for your setting and Victorian and ghost, the cover is going to be really important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's cool that you have approval. I should have asked for that back then. Have you looked at BookBrush? I dabbled with Canva, and I went to BookBrush. Have you heard of it?
I haven't. No, I haven't looked at that.
So
I'll have to check that out.
It's strictly for book covers.
Okay.
So you might take a look at it.
Yeah.
But congratulations. This is
Thank
tremendous
you.
success for your first book. Tremendous.
Thank you.
It's really great. You never know. We may have a series come up. You may be the next J.K. Rowling. You never know,
Gosh.
I always am
amazing.
so hopeful for everybody. I had to laugh because every time I watched the Outlander series, I would get mad when we go into present day time. Did anybody else have that happen? I go, no, take me back to the Stones.
Yes.
So I understand that. I understand those comments. So I'm looking forward to this. So is your mom going to be helping you with some of the research for the book?
Well, that's so funny. I mean, this book is effectively written, but the book is dedicated to her and my sister, actually. So, and maybe I'll find a way to get my mom in on an event or two next year. I think that would be really fun.
That would be really fun. And what you might want to do, just keep this in mind, when Karen Essick did Dracula in Love, which was a Victorian book, we had the local theater group dress in Victorian costume and did a reading playing the characters. It was so cool. It was the coolest thing ever. Everybody really, really enjoyed that. And the actors loved doing it. And it was a big night. So that would be really fun if you have a seance scene.
Yes.
And a local theater group for the launch to do. That would be very cool.
That would be fun. That would be a blast.
It would be fun.
Yeah.
Hey, maybe the Pulpwood Queens will do it.
That would be great.
We would, that would be fun for us to do. So any other questions for any of you out there? And the book's coming out in April, which is a good time to come out. And we're going to be watching for it. Anybody else have any last comments or anything? Well, thank you all so much for joining us. And for everybody, we recorded this. It's going to be up on the KathyL.Murphy channel. Would you like me to send you a copy? I can send you a copy in an email if you like, Sarah.
That'd be great. Yes. Wonderful.
And we just thank you so much for attending our book club convention and for coming back to do the blogs. I'm so looking forward to tomorrow for your blog. I had doctor's appointments the first week, so I was reading them on the run, but now I can enjoy them. So
Yes.
keep them coming. And you're going to have some stuff on your new book too?
Yes, that's going to be my Sunday post. My day 7 post will be what's next.
Yay! Thank you so much. Tell
Yeah.
HarperCollins we so appreciate them sending you to us, and we will love to have you back. And hopefully this world will open up soon, because
Yes.
everybody wants us to meet in person. So
Yes.
thanks everybody for coming, and we'll see you. Let's see what's down the road. We have our book and film club coming up this Saturday, and Kathy Ramsberger is doing I believe, is it this Saturday? She's doing the Writers Club. We have a Writers Club, Sarah, where our authors mentor to our members that want to be writers and even
Wonderful.
seasoned professionals. And I'm telling you, they're up on YouTube and they're fantabulous. Every author who's done a workshop, I'm so impressed, but we're always giving to each other. So if you'd ever like to come and do one,
I will let
love
you
to have
know.
you. Let me know. And thank you again. Have a wonderful night in Florida. Tell the husband thanks for putting the clothes away. And
I
we'll
will.
see you down the road, okay?
All right. Thanks, Kathy. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in.
You're right. It's all about the story. Bye-bye.
Bye.